Playing the waiver wire is important in fantasy leagues and can make or break seasons. For this waiver wire entry, we will take a look at Indianapolis Colts wide receiver Alec Pierce's fantasy profile and determine whether or not he's a player you should be picking up off the waiver wire. We'll start with some of the positives from Alec Pierce's fantasy profile. Streak of good games. Alec Pierce didn't do much in week 1 for the Colts and was out for week 2. But since week 3, he's been pretty good, totaling 15 receptions on 20 targets for 222 receiving yards over the last 3 weeks. He's kind of floated under the radar in some leagues because he hasn't caught a touchdown yet, but anytime a young 6'3 receiver with good draft capital strings together multiple games of 60 or more receiving yards, they're worth monitoring. The next thing I really like about Alec Pierce's fantasy profile is that he's got second round pedigree. Alec Pierce was taken in the second round of the 2022 NFL Draft, and in his draft profile, it's frequently noted how the 6'3 receiver is big, tough, and great at contested catches. This isn't just a random receiver that just happened to have a couple of big weeks. This is a guy that the Colts clearly view as a key piece of their offense in the future if they are willing to use that kind of draft capital on him. The last major thing I really like about Alec Pierce's fantasy profile is that he's got solid efficiency so far this season. According to Player Profiler, through the first 5 weeks of the season, Alec Pierce ranks 22nd among wide receivers in yards per route run with 2.41 per game, 19th in yards per target with 10.1 per game, and 25th in yards per reception with 14.8 per game. Being fairly efficient makes it easier to see Pierce's fantasy ceiling. Moving on to some of the concerns with Alec Pierce's fantasy profile. To start, we have to talk about how he's playing on the worst scoring offense in the NFL right now. As of week 6, the Indianapolis Colts have scored just 69 points all season, or 13.8 per game. This is the lowest scoring offense in the NFL right now, which may limit Alec Pierce's fantasy upside. The next major concern I have with Alec Pierce's fantasy profile is that head coach Frank Reich doesn't have a great track record with fantasy wide receivers. Going into the 2022 season, Frank Reich's wide receiver room as a whole averaged a below average 18.86 wide receiver targets per game over the course of his career in an offensive coordinator or head coaching role. In this time, he's only had 2 wideouts go over 1,000 receiving yards. T.Y. Hilton in 2018, where he had 1,270 receiving yards, and Michael Pittman in 2021, who had 1,082 receiving yards. The most targets that one of his wide receivers has gotten prior to Michael Pittman last year? Keenan Allen, with 121 in 2014. With Frank Reich calling the plays, Alec Pierce may have more of an uphill battle to being a wide receiver you can feel comfortable starting in your fantasy lineup each week, especially with Michael Pittman still being the number 1 wide receiver on the team. The last major concern I have with Alec Pierce's fantasy profile is that he's a rookie wide receiver. In NFL history, there have been just 27 players to finish with 1,000 or more receiving yards in their rookie year according to StatMuse. It usually takes pass catchers a year or 2 to adjust to the NFL level, so we may need to temper fantasy expectations with Alec Pierce in year 1. Some additional thoughts on Alec Pierce's fantasy profile. 5 games into the 2022 season, the Indianapolis Colts wide receiver room is averaging 20.6 targets per game. Snap counts. Alec Pierce played 47 snaps in week 1, or 51%. 32 snaps in week 3, or 45%, 29 snaps in week 4, or 44%, and 47 snaps in week 5 against the Denver Broncos, or 59% of the offensive snaps, according to Pro Football Reference. Personal opinion. At this point of the season, in 12-team leagues, there aren't a lot of fantasy wide receivers that have the potential upside that Alec Pierce does. Matt Ryan seems to have developed good chemistry with Pierce, and there's nowhere to go but up for the team scoring opportunities. It will be a bumpy road like it is with most rookie wideouts, but I think Pierce is worth a bench spot in most 12-team leagues. And that's it for today's waiver entry. If you have a player that you'd like to see covered, drop a comment below.